Hi everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian. I am joined tonight by Tim Masso.
Howdy folks, welcome aboard.
And thank you all for logging on. We've got an exciting show tonight, lots of great watches here on the table. As always, please do not hesitate to ask any questions in the chat. This is a live show for a reason, and we are here to answer any and all questions that you may have. While I am getting my video here to work, why don't we do a quick wrist check to get us going.
All right, you guys know me, I'm predictable. Easy M1.1, 43 millimeters, 500 pieces, 2017, Tegament steel. You guys know that this is a lefty chronograph, so it's easy to operate with your thumb rather than your forefinger. Screw down crown, 200 meters, bidirectional rotating bezel, and in tribute to the 1990s Easy M1, which used a Lamagna 5100 movement, Zinn re-engineered the 7750 in this one to have a center minutes indicator that just jumps in 1 minute increments up to 60. There's no hours register. It's very clean. Everything that isn't absolutely necessary for immediate time telling is minimized in red, including that date disc. The timepiece is also fun because it's got a copper sulfate capsule in the side of the case that pulls moisture out of the case. And the case, by the way, is nitrogen filled. I love this watch, I gotta be honest. I've slapped it into door frames.
I think we actually took one in pretty recently, didn't we?
If we have one,
I
guys,
think we have one.
I recommend it. I recommend it. This was the only one we've had so far, and it might have been fresher than most pre-owned watches.
I'll let you show this one off. So today I am wearing an FP Journe Resonance. I may or may not have worn it on the last show. I'm not entirely sure. This particular watch happens to feature one of his early brass movements. It's actually the 300th resonance that he made, and you know, I've seen a lot of the resonance pieces in his early brass movement watches, but what really drew me to this particular watch was the dial and just the way that it sort of faded into this almost like dirty, grainy salmon color, and I just, I absolutely loved it from the first moment that I saw it.
You can see a little bit of variation Brian's describing up at 12 o'clock on the dial, where there is a distinct fading at the edge, roughly adjacent to the crown. And by the way, you wind the watch, both mainspring barrels using the crown up at 12 o'clock. You can see a little bit of that fading and degradation up at the top of the dial. It's more apparent in person. By the way, lovely brass movement, rhodium plated. You can see those two balances oscillating, resonating, chipping away. The idea being that essentially like a metronome, if you put metronomes in a room, balances and pendulums will synchronize. The escapement energy that radiates outward is mutually constructive. So if one runs too quickly, the resonance effect will cause it to slow down by virtue of the other's beat rate. And if one runs too slowly, the resonance effect will cause that one to speed up a little bit. And they are very precise. They will run to within 5 to 10 seconds a day. And there is that little synchronization mechanism you saw me playing with before, because it takes a few minutes for the resonance effect to take purchase. And then once they're synchronized, then you reset the seconds so everything moves in sync. And yes, you can set them independently.
And, when I first got the watch, obviously, dial degradation, I think, can sometimes be a little bit of a turnoff. But for FP Journe, I love it. And it sort of shows that the dial hasn't really been touched or altered or updated in any way. At this point, it's one of the features of early Journes that actually, draws me to the pieces.
I'll also say this, there are two types of dial degradation with watches. There are those that occur as a result of natural manufacturing flaws. Think crazing on 1980s Rolex lacquer dials, fading on FP Journe dials from the early 2000s. That's generally considered to be acceptable. If a watch had a damaged dial, where some watchmaker who had no idea what he was doing did like this and put a mark in it, that's different. There's natural degradation, and then there's damage. And I think people tend to look at natural degradation more like errors on stamps as inherently collectible.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I definitely agree with that statement, and I think that, obviously there's going to be differences brand by brand on, how a watch matures. But as you said, if something's sort of like a manufacturer defect or error from the beginning, it can definitely sometimes be cool.
Yeah, like if Rolex printed Rolodex on the dial, I would be all over that. And that's my segue to my favorite Rolex. I'm a huge fan of blue dials. You guys know me. I like white metals, I like blue dials, and I also like a little bit of an off-kilter character, and that's exactly what the 2013 anniversary Daytona had. The first ever series production platinum Daytona. It's an extraordinary watch with the glacier blue dial, and as you can see, a Cerachrome bezel in a dark brown. The registers are in brown with exquisite polished chapter rings. The sunburst pattern of the dial means this one's highly reactive in the light, and with the combination of the blue and the brown and the ultra white metal of the platinum, this is just a monstrous watch. It's the reference 116506, and I have to say it's not a common watch by any means, in spite of the fact that people are all over the Daytona, even the gold Daytona these days. This is a timepiece that has a relatively low take rate because of a retail price in the low 80,000 range, but my goodness, does it feel like a treat. Just under 300 grams on the wrist. It looks and wears like any Daytona, but you know exactly what it is. It's a secret between you and your watch. Everyone else thinks it's steel. You know it's the real deal. And of course, 3-day power reserve, vertical clutch, COSC, column wheel, a lovely piece, and really the all-around super watch. Forget about the 5711. Buy this, please.
Unbelievable watch. I mean, again, I think the Platona is obviously a fixture now in the Rolex line. I think that it's a watch that when it first came out was not fully understood. I call it like the Rolex audience at large, but has definitely caught on. And I think that one of my favorite things about it is that they haven't done another watch with that brown ceramic component. Like if
there was a rare like diamond bezel version of this, but it wasn't the same.
Correct. Yeah. No. And I just think that, the unique feature of having the glacier blue and the platinum, obviously with Rolex, is very special, but having that sort of brown ceramic bezel be specific to this watch is definitely a nice feature as well.
And I have to say, Rolex launched that watch in 2013 when we were still crawling out of the recession. I have a feeling that with Daytona's hotter than hot right now, if that watch came out today, history would have been different. That thing would be waitlisted into the next decade, and everyone would be all over it at list price. I just think it came out at the wrong time. It was just before the mania for Rolex watches started. And it was really just before the mania for the GMT, the Sub, and the Daytona specifically started. So it was before its time.
Okay, so just want to welcome back, a lot of our regulars here to the show. Mark S., Watch Doctor. Who else do we have here? We've got High and Rising, so a lot of the regulars, thank you guys for joining the live show. I'd like to welcome Jason Main, who is a fixture on this channel as well. Welcome to the Watch Insider. I appreciate you watching a real watch show to probably get some tips to bring on your show.
Also, Jason can answer all of your questions about availability, pricing, and accessories. He's in the chat box specifically to be your sales Sherpa. So ask Jason all the questions that we often can't answer in the midst of presentation. Okay, let's talk about something, we talked about something fine. Let's talk about something tough.
Okay, so here we have a very unique beast. This is a Omega Seamaster Spectre edition, and this was the limited edition made 7,007 pieces for the 24th installment of the James Bond franchise. And they came out with a very similar watch at roughly the same time. One of the big differentiators though was the lollipop hand on this watch, and you've got here to the 007 accent there on the strap. Right off the bat, what really drew me to this watch, I think, was the fact that it wasn't sort of overly done 007. Like, it wasn't on the dial, it wasn't printed a million times. Like, from all outward appearances, it just really looks like a cool retro Omega. You've got the Fotina there. Obviously on the back, and there's a few added features there where that it's a 007 watch. But in terms of a really cool, unique option for a sport watch, if you're not able to get your hands on a Rolex Submariner or any of those other pieces, I mean, to me, this is a really good one to have. For me personally, I'm not a NATO band person. I probably would put this on a bracelet or something else. But again, this is how we took the watch in, so we put it on the strap.
Okay, a few cool notes. This is a bit of a variation on the standard Seamaster 300 meter. It starts with the lollipop, as Brian noted. A few other things set this one apart, and you can see on the dial, rather than the quarter Arabics, it features tri-Arabics, and the 12 has disappeared on the Spectre version. You also have, instead of the standard dive bezel, you have a bezel calibrated 0 to 11, and unlike the standard Seamaster 300, this is a bidirectional, vintage-inspired bezel. So this bezel will turn in either direction, just like a vintage 1957 Seamaster bezel would have. So a few differences. The bezel, the dial, the seconds hand, and a few differences. You can see some of the hardware is customized, 007 branded, and there is some Spectre-related language on the case back, individual numbering, as well as the name of the movie. But for the most part, this is a very discreet and muted Bond collectible. Considering Omega has previously festooned the entire dial with repetitive 007 logos, this is about as subtle as the co-branding gets in the house of Hayek.
Yeah, so, overall great option. And again, one of the things that I enjoy bringing on this show are watches that are slightly off the beaten path, or a limited edition, or an interesting watch that's been forgotten. That's really fun to learn about.
Let's talk about a watch that is, well, I'm going to call this a unisex option because of the size and the fact that the strap itself has sort of gendered it, but by no means is the strap mandatory.
Yeah, so, saw this watch, put it on my wrist, and was like, holy crap, I would love to own this. So technically considered a ladies' watch, but, having all the hallmarks or elements of a really cool, unique men's watch is this particular Vacheron Constantin. So I would say that this is a watch that was probably produced primarily for not really the U.S. market, but it struck me as a watch that's very similar to the Tank American, in which, technically men's watch, but thin, elongated on the wrist, with just a really unique look. And I think that, this watch on maybe a really cool, light brown or ostrich, or just a unique strap, really has a really cool look.
Now, the Prestige 1972 design was born in 1972 as a men's watch. It was reborn in the early 2000s as a ladies' watch, a special anniversary piece, and then later as a men's reference. This is white gold, and it is a mechanical manual wind watch. So yeah, we threw a perhaps lady suggestive fuchsia pink on this one, but by no means is that necessarily a lady's pink. This is the modern era. I'm into extravagant colors. That's my style. I'd probably go with a neon green, but this watch can be worn on any strap. The combination of the quirky design, the white gold case, the mechanical movement.
Let's turn it over a little bit on your wrist so you can also get a feel for what the watch looks like from the other direction.
It is highly, I'm trying to get a sense of just the contour against my skin. It is rounded and cambered, a little bit like a Franck Muller. So not only is it that kind of off-kilter rounded trapezoid shape, but it is a fully cambered banana shape in profile. A very easy watch to wear. It's a lovely reference, 25010, and a fun piece in every respect. This is a fun timepiece. Really enjoy this. I wish, frankly, that this timepiece were on a different strap to show it in a different light, because I think it's a cool piece, and I think
I'm going to find another strap for it and bring it onto the next show.
I think it would get more respect from this channel and this viewership if it were on a different strap.
Yeah. So, again, really cool, interesting, unique watch from Vacheron, and it sort of just shows how broad their product line is. Okay.
By the way, guys, sorry I'm not responding to you directly. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the computer.
Is your chat not up?
My chat is not up. We are very slow connection-wise up here. It's the third floor of our boutique in City Center, Philadelphia, which means that the best signal is on the ground floor. We think of you, the customer. Up here in the attic, it's the Stone Age. Okay, let's talk about something that takes us back to the 1990s.
So, what's so fascinating to me about this watch, and one of the reasons why I brought it on the show today, was I was doing a little bit of research, just pricing them out, the different metals, and just looking at where this watch is sitting currently in the market, and it struck me as absolutely crazy that a 5059, which is the Patek Philippe retrograde perpetual calendar, it's the predecessor to the 5159, which is still available and still in production. You've got a slightly smaller case size, but it's an officer's case, so it's a little bit thick on the wrist. You've got that hinge back. You've got lugs there which jut out just a little bit there, and it actually gives the watch a somewhat larger presence on the wrist. And what's crazy is that this watch with, call it a full set, box and papers, and mint condition, you can get in the, call it $30,000 to $40,000 range. And to me, that is just absolutely insane when I look at that relative to it is selling for less than a steel Aquanaut on a rubber strap.
You got to remember that retail for a Nautilus is about $30,000, and this is getting frighteningly close to that in outstanding condition with a full kit. See the caliber 315 inside with the Geneva hallmark, beautifully decorated. This is a watch that came out 36 millimeters in 1998, and it was right for its time. With the long-running Patek Philippe officer-style case, the idea is to emulate the pocket watches that were converted to wrist watches during World War I. Oftentimes, you'd have a pocket watch with the characteristic rounded pocket watch profile and the Hunter case back, allowing you to view the internals of the watch, and you'd simply have lugs welded on, and then using screws or additional welding, you'd simply fix straps to the converted pocket watch. And so this is designed in a luxury paradigm to channel that basic aesthetic. You have the perpetual calendar moon phase and the retrograde on the dial. You got a nice watchmaker's Roman numeral 4, a lovely matte white dial. You have the retrograde date. You have the moon phase with its crescent cut into the dial. And again, in 36 millimeters, it wears well on any wrist, but because it is a officer style case, the strength of those lugs mean that the rose gold timepiece wears just a little bit bigger than the 36. It looks more like a 38 on the wrist. A lovely
definitely.
piece.
Yep.
Underappreciated.
So, as you said, it's an underappreciated reference. Ultimately, does it harken you back to like how watches looked, call it in the past? Yes, but I just think it's a testament to the value proposition today and what consumers are looking for, and how if you're open to buying a slightly older watch like this, with perhaps not as contemporary a vibe, but still a classic vibe, there's just such good value out there to be had.
Yeah, if you're into Patek Philippe watches that are neither steel nor sports watches, it's a buyer's market, believe it or not.
Yeah. So, okay. Let's see here. Guys, keep the questions coming. If you have any questions about any watches here or just watches in general, Tim and myself are happy to answer.
Brian, quick question, because we get this question a lot. What is in your collection? We've seen a couple of your watches. Like, what are your big six watches? I know you've got a couple of pieces that make occasional rounds on the show. People know I've got just the one because I'm on every day. But what is in your collection?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously, I have like an eclectic mix. I would say that if like something really cool and unique and interesting comes along, I'll debate back and forth, should I add it, should I not add it? Generally, I'll take something out of the collection to put something in. But again, I've got, a Royal Oak in my collection. I've got a couple Journes, a couple Pateks, everything from a Roger Dubuis Sympathy to a Tag Heuer Carrera.
Do you have a G-Shock? Do you have like a beater watch when things get seriously rough? Because I've still got my 1998 G-Shock.
So my go-to beater watch is, and I think I wore it last show, was my all-titanium Omega Seamaster 300M.
All things are relative, folks. That's a good one.
But I feel like, again, it's a true tool watch, right? Like, it's extremely light. It's very durable, water resistant. Like, I don't have, obviously.
And we've got an Omega parts account, so we can always fix it.
Yeah, no, and you know what? The viewers of the show have seen my watches. Like, I'm not afraid to ding a watch.
Yeah, after the 5980, nothing would shock us.
Exactly. So, again, I'd say that's a watch that, I'm happy to bring into the water, and see how far I can push the boundaries.
Let me show you this one more time. A cool detail that you couldn't see while this watch was on my wrist. And by the way, I wanted to be clear, the current version of this watch is manual wind, but this is a quartz-powered caliber. So let me just be clear, this is Vacheron 1202. I didn't mean to imply that this one specifically was a manual wind. So right here you can see there's actually a mirrored effect on the numerals, and it's tough to convey through the lens, but there's actually a mirrored effect where every numeral and index is actually mirror surfaced on the otherwise satin finished dial of this watch. It is a lovely piece. I'm into that. I'm glad you brought that in.
No, it's my pleasure. So, why don't we talk about the chrono work? So I feel like every time I bring a couple watches on this show, and I'm like super excited to bring them on and talk about them, like, the first thing that you tell me is like, oh, I brought that one, and that one on the show, 2 nights ago. So, probably need to watch that in advance of coming on here. But so here we have a Breitling Chronoworks. The watch was launched in 2016. From all outward appearances, you see a basic Breitling watch, but one of the unique features of this watch is, number one, it's entirely ceramic, the case and the movement and the buckle. Number two, you've got ceramic bridges. and a lot of high-tech advancements that Breitling has made to this watch. And it was a limited edition of 100 pieces. This is the first one. And, you know, when I thought about this watch, or I saw this watch for the first time, it made me think of the first Fast and the Furious movie, when Paul Walker at Race Wars, they were looking at the
It was one of their rivals.
Yeah, one of their rivals, I forget his name, was driving like a Toyota, and he says there has to be at least 100,000 under the hood of that car. And to me, like, that's what I feel like this watch is. I mean, this is the AMG Breitling, right? Like, this is a watch where they went in, they dissected the movement, and they made advances to literally every single component of this watch, to where it is as high-tech as you can possibly get. And I just think that it was really cool. It was cutting edge. It was something that Breitling, you know, obviously definitely did not need to do, you know, but you can tell that it was a passion project of the owner, and I think that it was, you know, executed really nicely. Again, at the $40,000 plus price point, very expensive. Have to give Watchbox a little bit of a plug. If you go onto our website and you do want to take a look at this watch, I think it's at a much more appealing price point now.
By the way, this watch is awesome. It's like the entire Patek Philippe Advanced Research series of technologies, plus a couple of other ones in one case. Breitling made its own balance, which I'm going to freeze in place so you can sort of see it. It's a combination of two separate metals, completely immune to thermal variation and free sprung, unlike a standard B01. This is the B01 ChronoWorks. The bridges are not PVD black. They are made of ceramic. The plate is made of ceramic. The pivots for the second, third, fourth, and escape wheel are all silicon. So you have silicon pivots in ceramic bridges, so you actually take about 10 joules out of the movement and reduce friction in the process. There's an all silicon escapement lever and wheel, and there's a reprofiling of the wheels inside the clutch mechanism that adds a sort of spring to the leaf of the outer teeth, the result being that there's no play in the chronograph mechanism. All of this gaining the watch an additional 100 hours of power reserve compared to the 70 of a standard B01. And again, several different patents at play here, and this is revolutionary stuff. The greatest casualty of the new ownership of Breitling, this was started under the Schneider family, and I wish the ChronoWorks project had continued. Until then, we're going to look back on this like the BMW M1. The ultimate BMW of the 70s, and they wouldn't do anything even remotely like that for another 30, 40 years. I hope it doesn't take that long for Breitling to release the ChronoWorks 2, but I'm not necessarily optimistic. Nail this one, because there's only one number one in the world.
And, you know, another interesting feature of this watch, I think, is if another brand had built this exact same watch.
Patek Philippe.
And, well, let's not even talk Patek.
Audemar Piguet.
Yes, so that's a good one to go with. So, you know, let's spade a spade. Patek Philippe would not be making this watch, but I could definitely.
They would make the movement in the watch. They wouldn't make the outside of the watch.
I don't know that they would make like an all ceramic movement, but I could definitely see AP doing something like this. And I think that, you know, again, if every feature of this watch, call it other than the fact that it said Breitling on it and it said AP on the dial instead, they would be charging $100,000 for the same watch, if not more.
You can pick it up for like a quarter of that on our website. Fun piece and swimmable. The ultimate summer watch for 2019, and in ceramic, pretty much immune to scratches and scuffs. Now let's talk by the way, BUW SUR, BUW Sir, saying the M1 was cool. And then we have Mike H saying the BMW M1 was a disaster. Only the contracting of it. If they hadn't originally envisioned Lamborghini building it, it wouldn't have been nearly so traumatic an experience for BMW. Just straight up build it by motorsport. That's how it should have been from the beginning. And in any case, let's face it, the resale value of an M1 today has more than made the case. It's a legend, and there's a reason that BMW, which has crossed every red line from building motorsport SUVs to big, heavy, and Duff M3s to M5s that can't dance, they still haven't made a new M1. That's how sacred the name M1 is in BMW, where nothing else apparently is sacred.
Okay.
As you can see, I'm kind of passionate about this.
Yeah. I mean, we almost need to have a car show on the channel for you.
Yeah.
All right, so what else do we have here on the table? I think we're down to two watches here. But speaking of AP, you know, we'll make a nice little transition. Here we have a 39mm Royal Oak dual time with a blue rubber strap. And What struck me as interesting about this watch is that this is a watch that AP should still really be making right now. Maybe not, this exact iteration, but a 39 millimeter Royal Oak on a rubber strap, because to me, this is what's absolutely missing currently from their collection, right? Like, you've got, the 41 millimeter Royal Oak, I think is, for a lot of people, too big. I think that it's a 41 that fits larger. The 39 to me is probably the closest comparative watch to a Patek Philippe Aquanaut that's 40 millimeters, because even at 39, this is going to sit a little bit larger. And I think that for like an everyday, call it upscale, casual sport watch, the 39 millimeter Royal Oak on rubber was a really nice option. And I think that this would be, and I know that they just came out with the 38 Chrono, but it's a different look and feel. And I think that this particular watch really could have developed into something more. And this watch, as it comes now, I think it also came with a blue croc strap, was only made for a 1 to 2 year production cycle.
Yeah, this particular 26124 is a quirky watch. First, because as you can see, the change to the power reserve indicator was not to everyone's liking. So the watch became a little bit wacky in its final iteration. What I like about this particular watch is first the 39 millimeter size. It's kind of a sacred measurement for Royal Oaks. It is the original. But this is probably the easiest Royal Oak to wear on a smaller wrist since the demise of the old mid-size cases, because you've got the 39 millimeter and then you've got the most pliant and supple diver style strap attached to it. And this is an unusual combination, a standard steel Royal Oak on a diver style strap, but it works well. And if you've got that smaller wrist and you want to wear a full-size Royal Oak, not a mid-size, this is really the combination that you want. Even on a smaller wrist, like 13.5 centimeters circumference, you're going to find that this strap on this watch is very agreeable. Comfortable, a little bit wacky by virtue of that power reserve indicator, but it's a steel Royal Oak. You can't do any better.
No, I mean, again, awesome watch. And, I think that it's a little bit of an example to me that, AP has been a little bit off the beat in terms of trend for a company that was generally, let's call it, multiple steps ahead of trend in terms of coming out with watches. I think is a little bit behind the eight ball right now. I think that, some of their larger offshores are a little bit too big in terms of what customers want to wear. And I think that their Royal Oaks are slightly too large in terms of what somebody's going to want for something a little bit more casual and sporty. So I think that, again, I'm not designing watches for them, but, I think the diver should be a little bit smaller and a little bit thinner than it currently is.
Well, if you want the diver to own, go back and get one of the Scubas, because they were powered by JLC movements and they were really, really thin. Mm-hmm. So if you want a thin offshore, go back and get the Scubas from the 2000s. You've got your choice of blue and black and red bezels. They're lovely pieces. They're JLC powered. They're swimmable, they're diveable, and they can fit under a cuff. They're not that much thicker than a Rolex Submariner. So definitely go back and get yourself an AP Diver Scuba. I'll also say this. I would just fold the 44 millimeter line. I think there's enough inventory out there. I think the Royal Oak 44 has reached its sunset. I think it's overstayed its welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I think that it's just too large now. And that, but you know what? That's the reason why I think they're transitioning the look of the 44 to the 42, because I do tend to agree. I think that they are in the midst of trying to figure out how that watch fits into their collection. And I do think that they're missing out on a lot of buyers that perhaps want that look, but something that's not as large.
What they should do, in my opinion, with the offshore is they should go back to the original strap hinge. If you remember, the original lug system was a conventional hinge lug, and it was not the double plot system. Like if you look at how this strap is joined to the case, if you remember the original offshore, when it featured a strap, it was a simple hinge lug. It parked inside the lug like a normal watch, and it folded without any inherent stiffness to cause it to flare out. So if you can remember that original, I want to say 25770 strap, that should be on the next generation offshore. That would mean that a 42 would finally wear as a 42 and not like a 44 or a 45.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely agree. And I think that millimeter size and can always be somewhat misleading just based on the shape of the case. And then, they call it the fit of the strap and the way that the lugs are also a big determining factor in terms of wearability.
So here's a question from Mitch Grimes, and I think this is a good one because we're gonna differ on this. Tim and Brian, what are your thoughts on price appreciation on Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711, and will they continue to be scarce in the near term?
I think that it's definitely going to be scarce in the near term. I don't think anything is changing, let's call it by the end of the summer. I think that there is a good shot that a 5711 1A with the blue dial goes and becomes a $100,000 watch. I mean, I'm highly confident.
I think the key words there in that question are near term. Near term, yes. Long term, I don't see this as sustainable. Again, just go on Chronotype and Nautilus 5711. Many real watches, photos of real inventory. They're out there. The reason I think we're in a wacky period is because we're late in the economic cycle. There's still a lot of cheap money floating around. Interest rates almost uniformly around the world, they're either low or negative, and that's finding its way into weird niches like watch collecting. There's no legitimate reason for a $30,000 watch that's been in production for 13 years to suddenly see its price double or triple. So I do think in the near term you're fine. I think in the long term, if you paid $100,000 for a Nautilus, you'd have to want to keep the watch for the next couple of decades to get that money back.
I mean, again, but I think that you also have a mixture of, let's call it, hyping would be the wrong word, but I think that a lot of consumers are transitioning into a select group of brands that they believe will hold their value better than others. So that's the first thing. Number two, again, it's a watch that's recognizable from a distance. So there is a status symbol associated with having an Aquanaut or a Nautilus now. They happen to be extraordinarily comfortable, easy to wear all the time. So call it, beach to tux, as we like to say. And more than anything else, Patek is not ramping up the production of those watches to keep up with demand. A lot of other brands, if there was this big a surge, call it in the level of
Though
want.
they have raised their prices twice in the last year.
Once.
Well, they raised it.
They just raised it, yeah. So they had, an initial price increase on just 2 models, and then they just had a 4% price increase. But again, overall, I think that they were never making that many of the reference, and as long as demand continues to rise and supply is kept steady, you'll of course have that sort of difference in value between a 2012 example and a 2019 example. But like anything else, it's no different than if Nike came out with a limited edition pair of sneakers that they said there were only going to be 100 for the world, or if all of a sudden there was only 25 apartments in New York available for sale. I mean, you've got more people that want the watch, and it's effectively just a ongoing bidding process.
You see, the thing that I find a little suspect is that if Nike made those shoes for 13 years and then suddenly they were bid up to multiples of their value, I would wonder how sustainable it is. Like I said, the 5711, there's a lot of them out there. And I remember when Watch You Want would buy and sell those watches, and we'd sell them for $18,000, $19,000, and this was less than half a decade ago. So I do think that if you buy the watch at list, you're good. You're never going to lose money if you buy a new Nautilus at list. If you buy it a little bit above, I think you're still good. There's a threshold where I think we're looking at a bubble, and I don't know if that number where you wind up getting beaten by the market is 50,000 or 60,000, but I do think at some point we'll see deflation in that market just because there is a lot of inventory.
But if you think about numbers, so steel Nautilus represents, 25%, 30% max of Patek Philippe's production. So if you look at it, that they make, steel Nautilus and Aquanaut represent, call it 25 to 30% of their production.
I would even say it's less than that because the Ladies 24 is their most produced steel watch.
Correct. So out of 60,000 watches a year, let's, safe to assume that 18 to 20,000 of that is all steel watches, call it combined. So what percent of that 20,000 do you think is just the 15711 blue?
It's hard to say. All I know is that there's real inventory out there, which is legitimately priced. I just think that if every dealer on Chrono and eBay had pictures to the effect of stock photo, availability in X number of weeks, or call for availability, then I'd think that we're in a situation where there's real scarcity. Right now, I think there's just a lot of them because it's been around for a while. Production is never going to be high, but I just see this as weird. It's almost like we're seeing auction hysteria in the marketplace, and you normally don't see auction type bids on watches outside of auctions.
But you know what? It was, I felt the same way when I would look at vintage Rolex rising and rising and rising, and every month there would be another record auction, and every month I would say to myself, there's all of these auctions. All of these auctions are filled with, call it, vintage Rolexes, and they're finding more and more and more every single month to fill these auctions with. And every single auction, call it, the quality of that vintage Rolex gets better and better and better. And there are far more of these vintage subs and Daytonas out there than there are 5711s in the world.
I would
ungodly
strongly
more.
doubt. I think there are more. I think there are probably at this point more 5711s than certain variants of manual wind Daytonas.
You think?
Yeah, and like when you're dealing with something like a sub, like a 6200 or a 5510, I think there are more 5711s. But I'll also say this: it's the same phenomenon. The same money that's chasing. Brian has a good point. The same money that's chasing those vintage Rolex watches and the vintage Pateks at auction. It's chasing new and relatively recent watches as well. So it is a phenomenon where there are several bubbles within the markets, and that brings us to a question from Julius. Brian, do you guys think the Hulk will ever be discontinued? The Rolex Hulk, the green Submariner, for those not into the nomenclature.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, with a brand like Rolex, really nothing is off limits. Like, you know, do I think that they're going to discontinue the Submariner in general? No. But do I think that they would discontinue the variation? Of course. I mean, like anything else, you know, it's had its day. Perhaps they do something different. Perhaps they bring an anniversary, the anniversary colors to a different watch. I mean, you know, they could bring it to a GMT. I mean, there's a lot that they can do. I mean, you know, I don't have the answer to that, but I would see no reason why they wouldn't discontinue that watch.
And a good reason, a case to be made for it being discontinued is that they discontinued the Kermit. So there have now been 2 green subs. And if you ask me, I think the time has come for a little bit of a hybrid. I think the next green sub is going to be very different from the second one. I suspect we're going to see a Cerachrom bezel. I think we're going to go back to the black dial of the original watch. And I would not be shocked if we saw something that looks like a Supercase ceramic bezel Kermit, but with a no date. There could absolutely be a green no date Submariner, and a green bezel and a black dial would be a wonderful way to do it. So you keep the themes consistent and you continue the line, but you don't exactly repeat with each succeeding model.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's hard to argue with the success Rolex has had. I mean, of all brands, I think that they've done, call it, the best job of being as close to a car manufacturer in the sense of you have a massive model change, maybe once every 7 to 10 years, and then minor fine-tune adjustments to that over time. You know, as opposed to having to come out with brand new crazy watches every single year to attract attention.
They do have crazy watches every single year, but they're not listed on the website. Type in Gemset Rolex Factory Daytona or Gemset Rolex Factory Submariner, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Those are the crazy watches. Now, I will say this. The Sub's been around since 2008 in its current form. The Daytona's been around with only a few mods since 2000. So if you ask what's next, well, it's one of those model lines getting redesigned. And don't think they won't touch the Golden Goose. They redesigned the GMT, they repowered it, they added a new bracelet combo. They're not going to be huge changes, but you're going to see one of those model lines redesigned next year at Basel. I'm pretty confident of it.
You know, and you know, some of the changes that they make that I think aren't as I mean, they're obviously public, but you know, let's call it, it's not the eye-catching changes that they make. You know, we've talked about it before, the Datejust 41 being a little bit thinner, having the updated movement, the bezel's not as thick, and that watch now has actually transitioned into being an allocated watch, the same as a Submariner or a GMT Master 2. So Datejust 41s are now allocated in the sense of...
You don't just get as many as you want.
Correct.
Okay, good stuff. I'll also say this. There's an opening in the Rolex catalog for a manual wind watch. I think there needs to be more of a break between the Cellinis and the other watches, and I think a great way to do that would be to go with a manual wind movement, reinvestigate the display case back like they did with the Cellini prints, and heck, maybe even look back into their history and go with an oyster-cased manual wind watch. Anything could happen at any time with Rolex. Mm-hmm. And remember, these are the people who gave us the Leopard Daytona. So quite literally, anything can happen at any time. That said, I think we're just about out of time, but I'm going to answer one more question from Alex K. Greetings from Croatia. Alex, thank you for staying up late with us in Europe. Okay, I love Zinn because A, the watches are honestly priced for what you get. 2, the watches are tough, and I'm pretty hard on things I own. I'm hard on my bikes, I'm hard on my cars, I'm hard on my watches. I respect them, I take care of them, but a full gold or platinum watch is just not for me. I'll also say this, Zinn is innovative, and they don't charge you an arm and a leg for innovative technologies. When you look at something like Tegament, it's priced fairly, and it's useful. It prevents your watch from scratching. I can attest to that. I have not been gentle on this watch. When they give you something like a diapol escapement, they back it. They give it a 5-year warranty. Their standard warranties are 2 or 3 years, depending on the model. The diapol models are 5 years. And it just goes on and on. You get real innovation with Zinn. You get honest pricing. The timepieces last forever, and they're not trying to be something they aren't. There's an occasional crazy Damascus steel dress watch or something like the split-second anniversary chronograph, but it's exactly that, a very limited run. They're true to who they are, they respect their clients, they price their watches right, and the watches just last. So I think Zinn, across the board, you know that what you pay is what the watch is worth. And I love that because there's a lot of subterfuge in this industry.
Okay. All right. So I think that's all that we have for tonight. I appreciate everybody logging onto the show. I'm sure Tim does as well. As always, if you guys have any questions in advance of the show, or if there's any watches that you want to see on the show, please don't hesitate to email me. I think my email was presented at the beginning of the episode. But I never get the emails, so I end up just picking pieces that I think are interesting. Oh, we have one more. We'll go quick.
Real quick, blitz through it.
So I don't generally bring a Longa on the show because I am not really a Longa person.
I am.
You are. They tend to be a little bit too stark and surgical for me. But that being said, to me, the Longa one is it was an icon when it came out, and this particular example with their new blue dial that they started doing in 2017, I think really had a unique, interesting look, and I wanted to bring it on the show.
This is the Daymatic, by the way, guys. If you want a Day-Date Longa 1 with a blue dial, this is the way to do it. Bimetallic rotor. What other brand gives you a gold rotor with a platinum mass? The best of the best from Longa. I think I'll leave you with this parting sight. I can't top it. Words don't describe. I'll shut up and let you look. Can we get an ultra close-up for the star here?
And real quick, what's very interesting too is that they really launched this watch in 2017 and presented it as being something completely new and unique, but they had done blue dial Longa 1s in the past.
They had. You remember the white gold from the early 2000s? That was a great example. And they'd done the Daymatic before, but look, this is perfection, the combination of the two.
Okay. Yes, John Doe, hurry, we do need to hawk one more. So again, my name is Brian, this is Tim. This is the Watch Insider, and thank you all for logging on.
Thank you so much.
Good job.